Welcome, everybody, to Best Years in Gaming. This is the 1996 edition. I'm Canadian Matt. That's American Matt.
What up?
Now, I wanted to do these series because sometimes you look back and it's pretty mind-blowing at how many landmark titles come out at a time, especially in some of the years where we were changing formats, consoles, going from 2D to 3D. And these titles that come out that we're still playing today, we're still playing the fifth and sixth iteration of them. And if it's not even in the same series, it's still games that play that same way. So I'm just going to give you guys the quick rundown. This is in 1996 alone. Diablo, Quake, Resident Evil, Mario 64, Pokemon Red and Green in Japan, Mario RPG, Crash Bandicoot, Elder Scrolls 2, Parappa the Rapper, Tomb Raider, Metal Slug, Duke Nukem 3D, Tetris Attack, Virtua Fighter 3 in the arcade, Pilotwing 64, Wipeout XL, Command & Conquer Red Alert, Twisted Metal 2, Dead or Alive, Legacy of Kain 1, House of the Dead, Vandal Hearts, Civilization 2, Kirby Superstar Fire Emblem 4, Saturn had the Knights, of course, and Tekken 2 launched on PlayStation. So pretty amazing time in the industry. Let's go with some of the big hitters. Number one, I know you're a big fan of this game, Matt. Diablo really changed PC gaming, and it was a landmark title. It stole hundreds of hours from people, but gave them a pretty good loot in the terms of a really fun experience. How did this game change gaming for you, Matt?
You know, it's hard to, with Diablo and Diablo 2 both, it's really hard to, I mean, there are the online elements that are addictive for obvious reasons, but as far as the actual game goes and the aesthetic and what Blizzard did with the narrative there, it's hard to pin down exactly why and how those games felt so meaningful. But I think they just, it was at a time where 3D graphics were still relatively novel, and sprite-based and 2D games were kind of being perfected in a way. And Diablo and Diablo 2 both had this really gritty, kind of dirty, almost like going for this like 2D photorealism in a way in their character models and the environments. And it was just perfect for that dark fantasy setting. And I think once you got into Diablo, it just felt like a very severe game. And I mean, compare it to other things on this list like Pilotwings and Crash Bandicoot, when a lot of stuff, you know, everything was bright and bold and colorful and 3D and everything. They wanted everything to pop out at you. And then Blizzard just really stuck to their guns, and they told a really grim story in a really kind of grisly way in this very dark setting. And I don't know, it was enchanting in a really dark way. And obviously it made a huge impression on people, and the sequel was mind-blowingly popular. People are still playing it to this day. So, and obviously the Diablo franchise is alive and well in Diablo 3 and its expansion, Reaper of Souls, and they've expanded to all the major consoles. And it's hard to say, really. I think people could argue for StarCraft, Warcraft, and Diablo, all three, you know, like what really set Blizzard apart, what really put them on the trajectory of success. But for me, I wouldn't be such a Blizzard fan if it wasn't for the Diablo series. So just means a lot to me personally. I know a lot of people would probably say the same thing. So just a really meaningful genesis to a series and a company that has been milking it ever since.
I could be completely ignorant to the genre, but when I think of Warcraft, StarCraft, and a lot of what Blizzard does, they seem to take existing ideas and perfect them and refine them, much like how Apple does. To me, it seems like Diablo was maybe more of an original take. I could be way off. There could be, I mean, Baldur's Gate is a name that keeps coming up in my brain, and whether I have that timeline mixed up, but I've always thought of it like that. Yeah, you're right. When Mario was putting on a feathered hat and flying up into the sky and everything was so colorful and cartoony, Blizzard just wanted to sink you down, deeps into the literal depths of hell. And it was a game that is still played today. I mean, the originals as well as the series is still going. Diablo 3 is still a great... I had a friend that just bought a PS4 and he wanted to know, are there any good couch co-op games anymore? And that was one of the ones that pops up on a lot of the lists. So Diablo had its start in 1996. Another PC game that was big for multiplayer was Quake.
Yes.
Wolfenstein and Doom were pretty exciting for people to play, competitive first-person shooters, but Quake really perfected it. It was a game that took a lot of skill It's a game that a lot of purists compare constantly to the modern shooters and say that, all this auto aiming and leveling up and perks, and it gets so far away from the pure competitive parody of Quake, where it was about how well did you know the map, it was about how well could you do a rocket jump, and how well could you aim, and there was nothing to help you. There wasn't an X-ray vision. You had to listen, and you had to think strategically. Well, they're probably going to go for this weapon, so they're going to be around this corner. And it was a game that really purely nailed the competitive first-person shooter like no other game had at the time, and still for some people remains absolute perfection. I've never actually played much Quake, just more studied it. Have you taken a few shots in Quake at all?
No, actually, that was Quake came out at a time where I was not a big PC gamer. We had kind of our home computer that was not very capable of much else other than simple word processing and AOL. So
I had a 286 when my neighbors had a 386, and I would try so hard to get that thing to do anything as a kid, and I ended up deleting all of the colorful UI of DOS. So I ended up just having like a black command prompt, and I got really good at typing copy and paste, copying select 300 files over so I could play Commander Keen, and just trying to squeeze anything out of those computers. Because now there's a big jump, but oh my God, the huge jump back then. I remember the first time I saw a picture of VGA graphics and just having that digitized sprites and these hand-drawn animations compared to the blocks of, say, like Mario. It was such a huge jump. I remember seeing from Police Quest 1 to Police Quest 2. It's just mind-blowing in terms. And then just adding sound. Even sound was a big deal back then. Whereas a lot of people played with no sound for the longest time. And then you get a sound blaster. But
right.
Once you started getting to the CD era, it was light years ahead.
Right. So I felt the effects of Quake because when I got, and this was obviously years later. This was in the Xbox generation, but when the first Xbox came out and Xbox Live was brand new, the first full game I actually bought to play on Xbox Live was Unreal Tournament, or it was Unreal Tournament or Unreal Championship. I forget which one was on Xbox Live, but I mean, for obvious reasons and in obvious ways, directly inspired by Quake.
Sure.
And
it took Quake and just turned the speed up to 11.
Right. Yeah. That's Quake really pioneered the arena shooter genre, and it's obviously something people still pine for. That's one reason I was so enchanted with Doom, and the original reason I was kind of anticipating being disappointed in the 2016 Doom is because in multiplayer things were moving a little more slowly than I really what everybody wanted was a new Quake.
Right.
They wanted kind of an updated 2016 version of Quake Arena, and it's and then at E3, of course, we got that surprise announcement that Quake is coming back. So this is perfect timing to be covering this game. But yeah, it'll be really interesting to see how they take that original formula and they try to do justice to really something that spawns an entire genre and really cast a very interesting spotlight on people who are capable of doing that twitch reflex, hyper accuracy, constant move. I mean, it's such a skill-based genre. I mean, not anybody can go in and have fun playing Quake. You have to be a skilled video game player on either with your controller or mouse and keyboard to even keep up, much less do well. So it's for the hardcore players, and it's the first game that was unapologetically hardcore, catering to that group of people. So it'll be interesting to see how they honor that legacy.
If modern shooters are badminton that you could casually play with a beer in your hand, Quake is like tennis. You need to know what you're doing, otherwise you're just going to be hitting it out of the fence. Yep. On the consoles, Resident Evil made its debut. This was a big step forward, taking a stab at making a more of a cinematic game. A couple years before Metal Gear Solid, this launched a whole genre and was a big difference. A noticeable difference of playing on the PlayStation as compared to playing on, say, the 16-bit era was that you could have these experiences with full voice acting, very immersive music. I loved the pre-render backgrounds and the detail you could get out of that, and the animated sequences. I mean, it felt like you were really playing something new, and it's really fun to go back and play those old PlayStation horror games, Silent Hill, and there were actually a ton of them. There are dozens of really terrible clones, Resident Evil clones. And I mean, those are fun, almost like going back and watching like 1950s B movies just to see what they were going for, when you probably didn't have to be all that qualified to be a voice actor.
Right.
And a lot of those games, it seems like the animator was maybe given the job. And we saw that in video games a lot. I mean, now it's, you could have Hans Zimmer compose a score for a game, but in the 80s and early 90s, sometimes it would just be the guy who messed around with music in his spare time.
Yeah.
Resident Evil. Yeah, that was, I remember going and I wanted to buy Final Fantasy VII off some guy in a paper, and I wanted to trade him something. And he had a last minute change of heart, and he's like, I don't want the game you have that much, so you can only have Resident Evil Director's Cut. And I was really disappointed, but it was one of those surprises where I was pretty happy in the end that I got this cool experience I never would have tried otherwise.
It is pretty interesting looking over this list and the games we've talked about so far, how a decade later, so many of these are being recreated and celebrated in different ways. You have a lot going on with Resident Evil right now, and obviously the Quake remake.
2 decades later.
Yeah, sorry.
20
you're
years.
Right. Yeah.
We're still seeing a lot of these same franchises live on, and all these remasters going back. And it's because people that experience these as sort of their first wave of games now have a lot more disposable income. So it really makes a lot of sense to like put out another Quake, put out another Unreal, remaster that Resident Evil, which I'm all for. I mean, if you get enough quality for the money and they've made enough changes to warrant it being a full purchase, or it's just really bringing it up to the next console and not up-resing it and charging, $20 or something, I'm all for bringing it all forward and keeping it up there. People have got to get paid, and
which they're doing. They'll be giving that treatment to Crash Bandicoot here soon. We've brought that out a couple of times. Am I recalling correctly? You were never a big Crash Bandicoot fan, or you just didn't play the games, or?
I know I had the demo and I played a little bit. I wasn't really big into Crash Bandicoot as much. I was so into Mario at the time, and even though I was a real PlayStation fanboy, teenage boy, I remember secretly thinking in my mind when I played Mario 64, oh, please, Sony, rip this off.
Right.
Anything you can do, because this is perfection. How about you? Were you a Crash guy?
I honestly kind of like, I am. I'm a huge Crash Bandicoot fan, but my really fond memories are from a few of the demos that I had for the first 2 games.
Yeah.
And then I remember I rented multiple times a racing game that I
Crash Team Racing?
Yeah, I guess so.
I had that. That was pretty good.
Yeah, it was good for the time. Looking back, I'm not sure if it was actually a really good game or if I just had fun playing it with my friends. But I have what's weird is, and you and I rediscovered this recording our Dreamcast. Hear the song, guess the game video, but it's weird how I spent so much time with certain demos in these games that I never actually owned the full game disc.
Right.
But I still have this immediate Pavlovian like pleasure response to some of the sights and sounds, because I can hear the music from Crash Bandicoot, or just the sound effect of him jumping on one of the or one of those like bouncy boxes or the TNT boxes, or the sound it makes when you pick up those apples or peaches or whatever they are.
Real high pitched.
Yeah, that little clink. I'm really excited for the remasters. I guess they're doing the first 3, and I don't know if they're going to release those separately, and whether it's going to be like a total, from the ground up, or if they're just going to try to slap on really fancy graphics and have it be the exact same game. But
I think that's what they're doing, and I think because they're doing 3 all at the same time, that makes a lot more sense. Mm-hmm. If you were going to do something more like, I wish they did something about how they did the Ratchet and Clank.
Exactly.
Where they just cherry pick. They almost do it as how, this is probably how you remember it, and they make it look way better, bring in some old things, but use the modernities of gaming to their benefit. Otherwise, I probably would have liked it maybe just to be the originals and work out a way. But you got to start thinking about like how you stretch that stuff from 4:3 ratio to the wideness. I mean, that can affect gameplay in a way. I know Crash was generally a lot of vertical right down the middle of the screen, so that probably won't be too big of a problem. They'll have to fill in stuff on the other side. But I didn't really like the look of it, the remade look of it. I miss the old graphics, and if you're going for a remaster and the nostalgia of it, I would prefer that. But this is what they're doing. I'm assuming this is the easiest way to do it.
Yeah.
And charge more money. So that was Crash Bandicoot. Mario 64 also that year. I mean, Nintendo, Sony, and Sega all had their stab at how do you make a 3D game, and Naughty Dog and Sony decided to do their style with Crash, have it play a bit like a platformer, keep it linear, but have 3D environments and character models. Sega's Knights looked really nice, but really wasn't all that 3D at all. And then Mario was just full on 360-degree movement. And You know, and it's funny. You go back and you run with Mario and jump, and even Shigeru Miyamoto was saying he keeps referencing how fun it feels to move Mario in there, and they even have a word in Japanese for it. It's just like the joy of movement.
Yeah.
And how well they nailed that in that triple jump. Even I missed that triple jump playing Super Mario 3D World for the Wii U, but I mean that game nailed it. It was interesting how it morphed Mario quite a bit from Super Mario World being more reflex based, challenging platforms and a very fast game to a much slower game, because it was all about people were getting used to moving around in a 3D world, getting used to moving a camera around, and they really nailed it with the two different camera types. But it became more of a puzzle game. It was more of drop you in a level and they give you a vague clue and you try to discover that clue. And I really enjoy that, actually. I think I enjoy that more than Super Mario 3D World, which does have the option to go in a level and go get multiple stars, but you don't have the clue. So I like that sort of detective-esque. You know, I'd like to put a little Sherlock Holmes hat onto Mario, especially when that monkey steals your hat in that game. But that game still holds up today. I pop back to that every once in a while because of the graphics that Nintendo, the style that they chose to use, bright colors, not a lot of detail. They really worked with their strengths. We saw other games in the N64 try to go with real detailed texture maps, and it looks really muddy, and there's a lot of drawing. So they were smart. It was Nintendo. They knew what they were doing, and Mario 64 still holds up. Where would you put that in the series? I'll put you on the spot, because I know for me I'd put it up there pretty high. I actually haven't played Mario Galaxy, so I'm not really a good one to do any of the rankings, but we'll do a Mario ranking another day.
I think it's third for me. It's Super Mario World, and then Super Mario Galaxy, and then Super Mario 64 is third for me.
Right, okay. Over Sunshine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Over Sunshine and 3D World, and even the Super Mario Brothers 3 and a few of those other classics, Mario Paint. I've played them all and loved them all. But, right. There's Super Mario Galaxy is perfection to me, and it's bested only by Super Mario World and only for nostalgia reasons of nostalgia, and just because I think Super Mario World is some of the best platforming we've ever played in a video game still to this day. I mean, there's a reason that people continue to buy that on every single platform whenever Nintendo offers it. It's just it's a perfect platforming game. But Mario 60, and you mentioned how, that's almost kind of twitch reflexes, and it still had a lot of that old school challenge in it, where Mario 64 almost becomes, you said puzzle based. For me, like in my mind, I was thinking it almost becomes like a physics based game, because Mario has such a predictable weight to him in the environment. Right. These items and objects behave in such unique ways, and it becomes a game of prediction and weight, and how long is it going to take me to fall there if I jump at this point, and can I get over that and under that, and this thing is bouncing down a hill or swimming this way. I mean, Mario on land and in water and flying through the sky. I mean, they really made movement such a precise joy, and that's the reason it stood the test of time.
And they did a great job of, if you could see something, you could get to it. They didn't put a lot of frivolous things into it, because they were just these worlds that were in a blue sky. There was an end to the world, but because you were jumping into a painting, the logic made sense that, well, it's just a magical place, anything can happen. But if you saw a platform, there was a way you could get to it, and it wasn't spelled out to you at all. Maybe in that first level when they tell you to jump into a cannon, but after that, it was all up to you. And watching a platform move just sitting there and figuring out, it would actually make a pretty cool mobile game. Physics games work great on the phone. If you could have a little Mario 64 and throw them around and bounce them onto different areas and try to get through. So we'll see. Nintendo needs more ways to make money on mobile.
Right.
Another Mario game came out that proved the Super Nintendo still had a bit of life into it that same year, Mario RPG. Squaresoft's game for the Super Nintendo. And Nintendo and Squaresoft got together and made one of the greatest RPGs ever. A game that introduced the timing mechanic into what can be the most boring part of an RPG, is the combat. And instead of mindlessly clicking, it was imperative that you watched. And just like when you were playing Hot Shots Golf, it's all about watching that meter come back and striking it right at the right time. And that gives you a lot more damage, or it gives you a lot more defense. And I was marveling at that when we were playing some online Hot Shots Golf, like how exciting that makes every single shot, because it is milliseconds between the perfect shot and horrificness.
Yeah.
and that was what they added to that game. I haven't gotten too far in my RPG, but the moments that I have played it is a charming game, a lot of fun, and I still have one on my Wii U. Actually, I think I have the 64 version that needs to be played.
Nice.
All right, jumping back to PC, Elder Scrolls 2 came out after Elder Scrolls Arena. Set the
Is that Daggerfall? The second
that's Daggerfall, yeah. So yeah, one was Arena, which was supposed to be more of an arena fighter, and they fleshed it out into a giant RPG. Elder Scrolls 2 got a lot bigger and set the groundwork for the future Elder Scrolls games. This one was still 2 dimensions, but it was massive, huge story, branching story, multiple endings, and a lot of freedom. And this is why people love the Elder Scrolls series, and it's all there in 2 dimensions. I've never played anything about it, but I think if you like an old school RPG, this would be definitely one to go back to. You have any experience with this one?
No, I haven't, and it's funny because a lot of people who are kind of purists say, if you really want to play the best Elder Scrolls, you got to go back to Daggerfall. Why does nobody talk about Daggerfall? Daggerfall's the best, but I think a little bit is rose-tinted glasses and the nostalgia of it for people who actually, before the days of Morrowind, I think people who played Daggerfall were so blown away by the scope of it.
Yeah, the systems.
I'm not sure if it would stand up for people like me and you who would go back and play it for the first time after Morrowind and Oblivion and Skyrim and all these other great
Even
RPGs.
Morrowind is pretty muddy.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know if I'll ever really have the joy of experiencing that the way it's supposed to be experienced.
I was thinking with a dagger in hand. I was thinking about how, we're both pretty excited about VR, but the more I see the jump from 2D to 3D and how that brought people into gaming even more so, and how a lot of people started giving gaming a chance when it became 3D, because to them it was more like, oh, now I'm there. It's first person. It's 3 dimensions. Morrowind or Skyrim. That's a game a lot of people got into, but might never go back to that. And I think VR will be that next step, just like the Wii was, where it brought in another group of people that could just play by being more immersed. I'm going to bowl a ball with this remote. So VR Morrowind or VR Elder Scrolls or VR Mario, that might make you throw up big time. So
Fallout 4 VR is on the way.
Yeah, talk about immersion. Man, that's hundreds of hours to have a VR set in your face, so they must have figured that out. I feel bad for the playtesters. Although I don't think Bethesda has playtesters, judging by how their games come out.
Yeah, I was going to say. I was about to say PlayStation VR is remarkably comfortable, but I guess I think Fallout 4 VR it's either a Rift exclusive or HTC. It's only been announced for one of them, and I think it was either the Vive or the Rift. I forget which one.
I would put my money on Vive. They seem to be a lot more open, but
yeah, I think so.
All right, another interesting game that came up for the PlayStation was Parappa the Rapper. We didn't have a lot of rhythm-based games back then. And then taking full advantage of the CD music, having these really charming, catchy rap songs and a colorful, quirky, very Japanese toned cast. Great game. I keep trying to go back and play it. I don't know if it's the change from like old tube screen TVs to newer ones where it makes it a lot more difficult to get the timing, or if the timing was always like that. But I find, I'm a musician, and I would think I'd have a pretty good advantage of it. But as hard as I can never really nail the timing of it, which is a shame because they just nailed it. It's such a great game, and I'd like to see a remake of that with the proper timing and maybe more of a Guitar Hero style thing where you can more easily tell when how your accuracy is working.
I wonder if the PS2, getting it as a PS2 classic on PS4, I wonder if they kind of made the effort to make everything sync up really well as far as timing goes in that version.
I'd hope so. It seems like with those PS2 on PS4, they just sort of go through and it's more like it's a fancy port, but yeah, maybe they would go through and change it around. That'd be a great mobile game too.
Oh yeah.
Just make the taps work as your button presses, and it'd be awesome.
You're exactly right.
Another great PlayStation game that still has a very lively series today is Tomb Raider. Came out at the time. Those big blocky boobs on Lara Croft, the infamous nude code, and adventuring around in tombs. This was a step forward, a more adultifying platformers and adventures. It was the female Indiana Jones. It was a great game and a series that is still living on today, and you can see the roots in a game like Uncharted. So Tomb Raider. You play that one much?
No, I started with the second one and loved the movement. I would just do backflips and
Right.
side flips all the time. That was so cool. And like doing the little handstand off of cliffs and stuff. Was
Right.
just- but yeah, I mean, obviously Tomb Raider was a huge deal, and it was back in the era where I was collecting all these gaming magazines. Of course, Lara Croft was like the
Yeah.
gaming magazine cover girl for the next 6 and 7
That
years.
pre-rendered version
afterward.
we never saw in an actual game, but
Right.
she always
Yeah,
looked
and
best on the covers.
I remember I was in first or second grade, and Ben Yacko he printed out a picture of nude Laura Croft that he had found somewhere on the internet, which probably took him 25 minutes. I mean, this was in the days of dial-up.
Right.
And I remember he like brought us all into the corner of the gym to show us, and it was the most scandalous thing that happened that whole year. I mean, I was totally scared for him that he was walking around school with a nude picture of a woman in his backpack.
You get arrested.
I couldn't believe it. Yeah. So that was Lara Croft was awakening young men to puberty all over the U.S. and I guess Canada too. I guess you had Lara Croft, didn't you?
We did, yeah. I won't tell any stories about that, actually.
Okay.
Metal Slug in the arcade. Awesome series.
Hmm.
Fantastic shoot 'em up. Tons of stuff going on the screen. Beautifully, to me, it looks pretty hand-drawn and animated. Very, very fluid. Great sense of humor. As you're murdering just thousands and thousands. The game just felt so great. The weapons felt great. I think that was Neo Geo Game or SNK.
I think SNK, yeah.
Yeah, and they mastered it. That's a game I would love to have on every console, especially definitely if you can have a 2-player version of that. I'm from an island and we ride the ferry a lot to get to the mainland, and that was a staple. I was always really happy to see that in any of the ferry arcade shops.
Nice.
What else came out there? Duke Nukem 3D. Now Duke Nukem now is a bit of a joke. And
Yeah.
there were some terrible Duke Nukem games on the PlayStation. Time to Kill, it's awful. And how long Duke Nukem, I think 2000 took to make. It just took forever and really underwhelmed. But Duke Nukem 3D at the time was a really big jump in tech, in storytelling and this vibrant character brought to 3-dimensional life. Lots of secrets going into bathrooms. I mean, getting points for like peeing in a bathroom and hearing a one-liner from Duke is pretty commonplace now, but at the time was groundbreaking in a way that is not that impressive. But it was it was just a really fun, solid game, and we still play these types of games now. It wasn't the first of by any means, but giving that character a bit more personality was what that game was all about, and interacting with your environment in really interesting ways, and going into strip clubs and mowing down mutants was what that game did really well. A great game for that's sort of like, I'd say, the most influential games that came out at the time. I mean, looking down this list, the rest of them are just really great games. Tetris Attack for the Super Nintendo, if you've never played that, was a genius competitive 2-player puzzle game. In this one, the blocks, they come up, and you have to match them. You have a little cursor that does 2, and you can flip them around, and you match either 3, 4, 5. But as the blocks disappear, the other ones fall, and you can do combos. And if you do any kind of combo, you send the thwomps, that try to squish Mario, those big bricks. You send those over to them, and then that affects them, right? So you can, it was pretty easy to pick up and play, but my cousin, who I played Destiny with, he ended up going to school for university math professor or whatever. And this guy was insane because he only had 4 games, and I've never seen, it was mind blowing how good the game wouldn't actually track how many combos he would do. It would stop at 11 and he would just keep going. It was nuts, but a really, really great game. If we can ever play that sort of online, maybe like an emulator situation, I would love to do that one. I don't know if you've ever
that'd be
played
cool.
that one. They made a version for the N64 and they called it Pokemon Puzzle League, just to cash in, get that sweet cash in. And a lot of kids probably bought that and were really disappointed that it was a heady puzzle game. Pilot Wings, great launch game. I think it used the 3D environment pretty well. I was a big fan of Pilot Wings on the Super Nintendo, and it was nice to have a little bit more variety and freedom. That Virtua Fighter 3 in the arcade, that's when Virtua Fighter 3 just got a little more slick, but still nothing revolutionary, but still a great game to have around. Wipeout XL, PlayStation really utilizing the CD format and having really cool licensed tracks, probably for the first time on the console. I mean, hearing Prodigy and Chemical Brothers was pretty mind-blowing.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was. Oh man, they had Firestarter was on there, and like just like lots of really hot, fresh stuff that was trending at the time. They put in the
Cool.
game, and it was awesome. That was actually, you remember when they had that big PSN problem where they're like, whoopsie, somebody kind of got all your credit card information on PSN,
Yeah.
and they had to shut it down for a while. When they came back, they had a version of, you could either have Wipeout or Infamous or some other game. That was the like We're Sorry bundle.
Yeah.
And I grabbed Wipeout again for the PS3. And you could even put in your own custom tracks too, and you played.
Cool. I've always loved Wipeout. That was one of the best looking games on PSP. I think
Yeah.
it might have even been a launch PSP title. And I remember that was the PSP game that you wanted to show your friends and be
Right.
like, look what this thing is capable of.
Look
It
what's in
looked
my pocket.
Gorgeous. It was so cool. And especially like they had weather effects and the rain would kind of splatter the screen and
Right.
nothing would ever slow down. I mean, it looked like a PS2 borderline PS3 game running
Wow.
on the first PSP. I mean, it just looked fantastic, and it was so fun. Other than Hot Shots Golf Open T, I probably poured in the most hours in Wipeout.
Oh, maybe we should get there for the Vita and try to play that online. Bring back some old memories.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Command & Conquer Red Alert. We mentioned on the last show that you can actually, it's called CNC Net. You can play these old Command & Conquer games against each other, whether you're on a Mac or your person's on a PC, cross-platform and all that. But, Command & Conquer had been out, and Dune had already been out at the time, so not revolutionary, but still great. Twisted Metal 2.
Speaking of great soundtracks.
Oh, man, the Hell March.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I still listen to that. Every once in a while, I go into that YouTube hole and find and emerge on the other side listening to some, like, orchestrated, fully live version.
Right.
Oh, that game was killer. Dead or Alive. A decent 3D fighting game. I think that was the one that had the that counter button in it, which was always nice to see. And the floating boobs. Legacy of Kain 1, The Blood Omen. This was a pretty neat game for the original PlayStation. You played a vampire. Anytime you got to play the bad guy in a lot of these games was still pretty new
Yeah.
at the time. It was a bit clunky. It was sort of a top-down RPG. It was really doing its own thing. But it was muddy and it was clunky, but it was a really interesting game, really difficult too. And then that gave way to Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver, the 3D version that came out after that.
Yeah.
What else do we have in here? House of the Dead, great arcade game. Vandal Hearts, Civilization 2, Kirby Superstar, Fire Emblem 4. I know you're a big Fire Emblem guy. Have you ever played that?
No, I regressed. I started with Fire Emblem Awakening on the 3DS, and then I've tried to go back and play classics before that, and I still have way too much catching up to do.
Yeah, I would think that those games would hold up over time just because of the...
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's more about the numbers and the strategy of it, right? So, and then we had Knights and we had Tekken 2, and that was it. 1996.
Hell of a year.
Hell of a year. We'll be doing one of these a week. We got some other years coming up. One of my favorites, 1998, with Metal Gear Solid and The Legend of Zelda. That's enough gaming for 1 year right there.
Mm-hmm.
But there are some great ones. Even that a couple years back when Journey came out, that was a pretty incredible year. The rise of Xbox Live, games like Fez, Braid. There are some pretty great years. And then we'll go back to the real classics and check out what Nintendo was doing, pumping out real revolutionary titles in 1 year
Cool.
with their seal of approval. So that was it. Best years in gaming, 1996. Let us know if we missed any of your favorites in the comments, please, and we'll feature your comment in the next show. Bye for now.